Hi, everyone. You're just moments away from listening to the series premiere of the Paddlefish Caviar Heist. But before we begin, we want to share with you how this is going to go. Each week, we'll be publishing a new episode for free, available on any platform where you listen to podcasts. That's 8 episodes in total, one available every week. If you just can't wait for new episodes and want to get early access and an ad-free experience, you can subscribe to the Imperative channel right now on Apple Podcasts. It's your choice. With over 100 hours of content already on the Imperative channel on Apple, there's a huge slate of shows available right now. Plus, a bunch of new series coming out by the end of this year that we think you'll absolutely love. Thank you so much for your support. Now, let's begin our show. I'm driving under the speed limit because it's so curvy here, but we just drove over Truman Lake, which is super beautiful and massive. Me and my producer, Aaron, are on the road. We're making the 2-hour journey from Kansas City to Warsaw, Missouri, in the heart of the Ozarks. Wow. Oh my God. This is pretty spectacular. With its sparsely populated, rugged backcountry, you might hear Ozarks and think of the Netflix show about a guy who moves his family out to the lakes to launder money for a drug cartel. And it's not entirely untrue. Parts of Missouri do have a dark past. In the early 2000s, Greene County, just an hour and a half from here, was nicknamed the meth capital of America due to the amount of meth labs there.
Caviar trafficking has landed in Missouri.
That's the headline that grabs my attention. I'm a journalist, and back in 2015, I was working at Vice Media, where I was the founding editor-in-chief of Munchies, a website that covered all things weird and wonderful in food culture. I remember the day this story crossed my desk. It sounded completely bizarre. It went on.
The self-proclaimed paddlefish capital of the world,
By the way, that's my producer Aaron reading.
Is now the unlikely epicenter of a black market caviar hub.
I was living in New York at the time, running a website that on any given day involved working with well-known food writers, celebrities, and notable chefs, and dining like there was no tomorrow at the hottest restaurant openings around the city. But I grew up in Texas. Apparently, this paddlefish capital of the world is only an hour away from where I attended summer camp as a kid. How had I never heard of this? And then I see the story crop up online several years later. I'm not sure if it's the algorithm following me or if the story is still alive. But I decide it's time to figure it out for myself. There are tons of vibrantly lush green trees, beautiful shorelines, but it's the rocks themselves that look fake. They're almost like something you'd see in Game of Thrones. We're heading to a tiny town called Warsaw, with a population of a little over 2,000 people. It's a long way from its namesake in Poland. And a decade ago, this place was the site of a major poaching and smuggling operation. It reads like something out of a Cold War thriller. The Russian mafia descends on a small American town to steal its most prized possession. And when fish guts start appearing on the roadside, police launch an undercover sting, Operation Roadhouse, to catch the criminals. Or maybe it's more like Parks and Recreation meets The Wire. Having spent the last 6 months trying to crack this case, I've come to realize that this is far from a simple crime story. I've learned a ton about this part of Missouri and the ancient monstrous fish who live here. But I've also uncovered a silent war between locals and the Eastern Europeans that have traveled here to fish. It means more to both sides than I could have imagined. The part I didn't expect, that I'd get wrapped up in the middle of the story myself. This journey takes me from fishing for huge paddlefish in the middle of the Ozarks.
You've just got to be in the right place at the right time and come up on one, and it's addicting, it's like a gamble, you know.
To London and New York, by way of Tsarist Russia.
Catherine the Great served these hugely extravagant banquets where people commented on the amount of caviar and jewels that were laid all over the table.
I meet undercover federal agents.
Wildlife officers is one of the most dangerous jobs in the country, and there's good reasons for that.
To pull off an investigation of this magnitude and this complexity over basically a 3-year time span is a pretty remarkable accomplishment.
International crime ring experts.
Caviar-related criminal organizations can be violent. They want to protect the criminal activities that they run and also the criminal markets they benefit from.
And Russian celebrity chefs.
Caviar is kind of being with God. It's a taste of money.
But first, I want to visit the scene of the crime for myself. According to Google Maps, we're 6 minutes from our destination. Though the local population could barely fill up a high school gym, the town of Warsaw is sprawling. The wide streets are lined with strip malls, mom-and-pop shops, and empty parking spots. It's nestled between 2 huge lakes on the Osage River, the Truman Reservoir, named after the only president to hail from Missouri, and the Lake of the Ozarks. In every other direction, farmland stretches forever. It's anytown America. With all this water, it comes as no surprise that fishing is a huge part of the culture. It's the beginning of August. It's hot as Hades out here. It's about 90 degrees Fahrenheit, which, if you're into fishing, you know that it's not a great time, especially at 2 p.m. in the afternoon, to go fishing because nothing's snapping. We're standing on Main Street. It's the middle of Monday afternoon. You'd think it'd be busy, but there's barely anyone around. Most of the coffee shops and restaurants are closed, except the Rusty Skillet, a bar and grill with a neon open sign in the window and wooden benches out front. A couple doors down, there's a cute little ice cream shop called Back in Time, with large wooden doors and a chalkboard advertising ice-cold root beer. And a short walk down the block is the typical small-town main square. The Benton County Courthouse, a stark red brick building, faces the Veterans Memorial and one of the town's many churches. It feels like I'm a little bit in an Edward Hopper painting, getting a lot of looks from people, mostly because I think we look strange. But we also look like city slickers. The guy on his lawnmower that drove into town and keeps staring at us because me and my producer are walking around with a microphone and we stick out like sore thumbs in this place. To be honest, I'm having a really hard time picturing this place as the epicenter of an international conspiracy. It's hard to imagine, well, much of anything going on around here. I'm Helen Hollyman. From Imperative Entertainment in Vespucci, this is the Paddlefish Caviar Heist. Episode 1, Fish Guts on the Roadside.
Influencer. It's a word that gets tossed around a lot these days. There is a woman who went the distance, who broke ground as the first true influencer by living a remarkable life. Her name, Elizabeth Taylor. I'm Katy Perry. This is the story of the original influencer. This is Elizabeth the First.
Elizabeth I, the podcast, wherever you listen.
Influencer. It's a word that gets tossed around a lot these days. But what exactly is an influencer? Well, there is a woman who went the distance, who went beyond the dazzle, who broke ground as the first true influencer by living a remarkable life. She had power, real power, and longevity, influencing generations. Her name, Elizabeth Taylor.
I know she was loud. I know she was hysterically funny. I know she swore. But Elizabeth said how painfully shy she was.
She went on perfume tours, and the places were mobbed just to see her.
She was starting to try and take control of her life, but then tragedy and life kind of got in the way.
I'm Katy Perry, and Elizabeth Taylor has fascinated, inspired, and influenced me as an artist, woman, and an advocate. This is the story of the original influencer. This is Elizabeth I.
It's clear we won't get anywhere by hanging around Main Street. I need to speak to someone who knows Warsaw. Someone who would have the inside track on the comings and goings. Luckily for me, Benton County has its very own museum, dedicated to Warsaw's history and heritage.
I'm Marcia.
It's great to meet you.
And you are who?
Helen.
Helen. Well, come on in.
All
Come
right.
on in.
Great.
Awesome.
Marcia Eaton is smartly dressed, warm and polite with glasses. She looks every bit the school teacher she used to be. She's now the curator of the Benton County Historical Society. Established in 1971, it operates out of an old converted office next door to an auto body shop.
This was originally a medical building, and you will see the small exam rooms that, we have opened up, and each year we have a special exhibit in this room, and this year is Christmas Memories.
We're met by a small crew of locals, including a journalist from the town newspaper who seems a little confused by our presence. Starting in a room full of tired-looking taxidermied animals, we're led on a whistle-stop tour of Warsaw's past.
This was Jerry Lumpy, and he was a local man who ended up playing baseball for the New York Yankees and Detroit and Kansas City, and he was our hometown hero. Great guy. This is our military.
Each room has the town's history proudly on display. Mussel shells from the Lake of the Ozarks that have been transformed in the Victorian-era button factory. We hear how the town took a beating from both sides in the Civil War. And in a room with the slogan, "Gunstock Capital of the World," we hear about Warsaw's once booming manufacturing industry. In front of a rusty old fishing rod, Marcia invites the president of the museum to join us.
Leroy, can you give any info on the spoonbill?
I grab the moment to turn the conversation towards paddlefish.
Yeah, Leroy's a big fisherman, a big hunter.
Yesterday.
By the way, locals call paddlefish the spoonbill.
The spoonbill is a prehistoric animal. Been around for many, many years. At one time, it was very exclusive that they were in the Osage River arm of the Lake of the Ozarks. They had a natural spawning ground up the river because they had clean gravel beds and they could spawn and reproduce.
Recreational fishing is big business in Warsaw. People come from all over the country because if you want to catch fish as big as these, you'd usually need to go to the ocean. To avoid overfishing, the number of paddlefish that can be caught is just 2 a day. And the short season when you can fish for them is also tightly controlled. So when the paddlefish start spawning, in the 6 weeks between March and April, this quiet town transforms into a bustling, boisterous place as fishermen and women pull up for snagging season. It's called snagging because of the way paddlefish are caught, dragging a heavy hook across the bottom of the lake, up and down, sometimes for hours, until you snag the fish and haul it to the surface. It's more intense than a tire flipping session at CrossFit, but more on that gruesome process later. Leroy again.
Truman Lake has an unbelievable amount of spoonbill as well as the Lake of the Ozarks here, right here locally. And they catch fish every year up close to 100 pounds and even over 100 pounds.
I figure Leroy must know something about Eastern Europeans turning up to steal some fish eggs. So I try to steer the conversation in that direction by asking if he eats paddlefish.
People do eat them. They have to trim a lot of the dark meat off of them to clean them up, but there's some waste to them, but they're still edible.
We've also heard about eating the eggs.
Ozark caviar, is that what they call it?
The Ozark caviar. Okay, so it's got its own name around here. And then Leroy starts talking about Operation Roadhouse, although he doesn't refer to it by that name.
There was a big bust on that about 10 or 12 years ago here. And we had some people that was catching these large females, taking the eggs out and shipping them to Russia and selling it as a caviar. One of our local conservation agents become very much involved with it, working with a sting operation. He was able to get our local prosecutor to work with him on this wildlife case, which is kind of unusual in itself. Being the prosecutor worked with him, she was able to stick the charges and get the federal help she needed.
I want to know more, so I played dumb. Who is taking these eggs? Or is it just people from all over the country? Or
they had ties all the way, I believe, up into Chicago, and from Chicago shipping them to Russia is where a lot of it went. The egg sacs are huge when they harvest these fish in the spring of the year before they spawn out. Several pounds add up in a hurry, and they started selling this by the pound and making it a profitable situation, sending it back to Europe.
Okay, now this I did not know about. Leroy is saying that the paddlefish roe were being smuggled across state lines and shipped all the way back to Russia, where it was presumably repackaged as premium caviar and sold on the black market. I want to know where Leroy had gotten this information, but it seems this is all he knows, or all he's willing to say to a couple of strangers from out of town. So why would an organized crime crew go to all this trouble over fish eggs? Caviar is one of the most expensive and rarest delicacies on Earth. And even if you have eaten caviar, you may not know all the facts about this delicacy. So here's a quick primer. Caviar is normally made from the raw unfertilized eggs roe from sturgeon, a large family of bottom-feeding fish that is found in the Caspian and Black Seas between Eastern Europe and Russia. These eggs, thousands of tiny jelly-like beads, each smaller than a pea, are scooped out of the female fish and cured in salt. They can be eaten a bunch of different ways, with a teaspoon on top of a small pancake called a blini, or even as a garnish on a fancy plate of food. I personally love eating it with tater tots or potato chips, which is the most aging millennial thing I could say right now. A cetra, the highest grade caviar, can sell for up to $200 an ounce. Other kinds of fish roe, on the other hand, like bowfin, hackleback, and paddlefish, can be sourced all over the world. But the cheaper stuff tastes pretty different to authentic sturgeon caviar. Sturgeon caviar has a clean pop texture and oceanic flavor. But paddlefish roe, well, to me, it tastes muddier, earthier, and way less consistent in texture. It's like, if you had the choice, would you rather eat a McDonald's hamburger or a perfectly cooked Wagyu steak? That's why a cetra caviar can cost 5 times as much as paddlefish roe. Before becoming a food writer, I'm not sure I could have honestly told you what the difference was between all these different kinds of fish eggs. And for someone who isn't eating this stuff regularly, the subtle differences might not even register. And if someone was about to disguise paddlefish eggs as high-grade caviar, well, they could make a killing. Me and my producer Aaron are sitting out at the deck at the Landing Bar and Grill, overlooking the harbor. We're eating lunch and staring off at the 3 white-hulled fishing boats gently bobbing on the waterfront. Aaron is researching the conservation officer that Leroy told us about. This officer, Rob Farr, could be the key to unlocking the whole story. When our waitress comes out to refill our waters for the 3rd time, we get chatting.
I love the slow pace of life here. There's no hustle and bustle, and it's everybody just lives on lake time. It's real relaxed. Both of the lakes are right here. We have Truman and Lake of the Ozarks.
Bailey, in her mid-20s, with straight long brown hair, was born and raised here in Warsaw. When we tell her that we're reporting a story on paddlefish, her eyes light up.
I lived with my grandparents growing up, and my papa was a big-time fisherman. Got me into all that stuff. Mostly catfish and crappie, a little bit of bass here and there. We always go snagging during snagging season.
It's early August, and the town is eerily quiet. So I ask Bailey, what's it like to be on Main Street during snagging season?
It's really night and day. When snagging season starts, it's a totally different place. Our population quadruples. You walk out there and it's trucks and trailers and campers and just people everywhere. It's really kind of crazy how many people that it attracts, and it's a big deal. It is.
Who are the people showing up for snagging season?
Well, it's a lot of men. It is. You see some women that like to do it, but not quite as diehard. It seems like big groups of buddies, coming in from wherever, and they get a hotel room and cram 7 or 8 of them in there, and somebody's got a boat, and everybody goes out, and they'll do it for days until somebody gets a couple fish, and it's very competitive. Everybody wants to get, the biggest fish they can get, and they're all making bets and talking trash, and it's really fun. And then when all the fishermen come in, they want to go have a beer somewhere, and they're all in there showing each other pictures of what they've got.
When you know what a paddlefish looks like, it's easy to see why snagging and bragging go hand in hand. Paddlefish are huge. They can grow up to 87 inches long, the average height of an NBA player like Larry Bird. They can weigh as much as 200 pounds by the time they're 30. These are big boys, which makes them an especially unusual prize in the trophy fishing world. Honestly, they make Billy the Bass look like a peanut. And they look strange, too. Their long blade-like snouts look like the paddle on a wooden oar and make up almost a third of their length. They're completely boneless and have beautiful gray shark-like bodies and deeply forked tails. Known as the whale of the lake, their large, toothless mouths act like a vacuum, hoovering up tiny plankton at an endless buffet. They're a prehistoric species that have been around for millions of years. It's like you're catching a dinosaur or something.
You are catching a dinosaur, and it's crazy. A lot of people, I don't know that they even know that. I don't know that they understand just how old they are and how incredible it is that they're even still here.
Have you ever eaten paddlefish / are you a fan of eating
I am
it?
not. If I get one, it's who wants it. It's a very acquired taste, I would say. Not really my thing. And everybody swears they have the secret. They're like, oh, you've got to clean it like this and soak it in this and, use this. And I've yet to have any that I'm crazy about.
How would you describe what it tastes like?
It's not like a light, flaky kind of, it's meaty. But the flavor is fish, straight up fish.
Have you ever tried the eggs before? Or?
I have not. I haven't. And I don't really know anybody that is into that. A lot of the people, especially from other countries that come here, that's a big deal for them. That's mostly what they're after. They don't even really care about the fish so much. They just want to get a pregnant one and get some eggs. And that's not allowed, They have to keep the whole fish. But I'm pretty sure it's illegal now.
I feel like I'm being welcomed into the community. But it doesn't really seem like I'm getting any closer to Russian mafias or international smuggling operations. I had assumed that when a major crime happens in a town this tiny, it would be the only thing locals would want to talk about. This might be harder than I thought. But soon enough, I'll be hearing about undercover agents secretly recording their deals.
We're not supposed to be doing it, but we can do this as long as you want, man. As long as you got the money.
Well, I got the money, I'm telling you.
Moonlight knife fights by the lakeside.
As a law enforcement officer, of course you're going to step in and keep somebody from getting hurt. But do you risk blowing your cover by doing that in a situation like this, and how do you handle that?
And just where all of this caviar was headed.
I don't know what anyone would do with 700 pounds of roe if they weren't taking part in the black market caviar trade.
Just then, the phone rings. It's Rob Farr, the guy who helped launch Operation Roadhouse. He's inviting me and Aaron to dinner at his house the next day. And as it turns out, he'd have a lot to say.
Went to this dead-end gravel road out here, and there's 20 spoonbill laying there with their bellies slit open, and I knew that the problem had got here at that point, and that changed our lives for a while.
That's next time. The Paddlefish Caviar Heist is a production of Imperative Entertainment and Vespucci, and is written and hosted by me, Helen Hollyman. For Imperative Entertainment, the executive producer is Jason Hoke. For Vespucci, the executive producers are Daniel Turkin and Johnny Galvin. David Gavi Herbert is executive producer, based on original reporting by David Gavi Herbert. The series producer is Aaron Keller. The story editor is Matt Willis. Thomas Curry is the managing producer. Audio recording by Austin Sizzler at Eastside Studios. Audio mix and sound design by Matt Peedy.